Welcome to What the Hex, your source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 skittering skinks. I am your host, Phil, and with me as always is my co-host, Davy. How you doing, Davy?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for me too, but I'm more excited for you.
Just so excited. The day has finally come. If you couldn't have guessed from that intro and my excitement, our topic today is going to be Starblood Stalkers and talking about those wonderful little blue lizards. But to start us off, let's just set a little bit of context here for when we're recording this review. So we are recording on the day of the pre-order. So they just went on pre-order, which is also the same day as there was a preview show today. I haven't watched it yet.
Wow.
I think there's some juicy stuff in there probably for Underworlds as well. I saw there was going to be Underworld stuff.
Yeah, there's the full, you saw all six exclamation point miniatures for the Ossiarch Bone Reapers warband. So that's cool. That's pretty exciting. I did not, so the Mir Kanan, I think is his name, the big axe guy who had seen before.
Yeah.
I think I didn't quite realize just how big he was until he was standing next to some human-sized skeletons. That guy is grande.
Yeah, like Malog huge?
Yeah, like Malog huge. So,
wow. Okay, that's not what I would have expected at
all. Well, here we are. I'm and not to get too far off on these guys, but it'd be interesting. I think it was not immediately clear to me if he's the leader. I'd have to watch the video again because we got some of those like real kind of partial view sort of things of here's a fighter card and you can see 23% of the actual face of it. The
best teasers.
So I think people who have watched it more than me or who are more paying a little more attention at the time probably spotted what his deal was. But as big boys go, if he goes in the Hrothgorn and Malog club, which he seems size wise like he might, it'll be interesting to see how he fills that out. And he's got the most compatriots of any of those as well.
Yeah. Well, he's only 2 months away, right?
Right. Yeah.
So not too long of a wait.
Yeah. And he might just be 5 wounds. I don't know. Anyway, it's exciting.
Yeah.
And I was also about to be like, this is the first time we haven't seen a 7-fighter death warband, but that's not true because of Dreadfane, the
true
Lady Heroes.
Yeah.
Lady Heroes bucked that trend already, but
well, and then we're gonna have another death warband a la Dreadfane, right? That are gonna be not 7 fighters.
Right, exactly. So,
just changing everything up here, Death.
I just skimmed it here. Mir is the leader, so he is big. He is the leader. There looks like there's another guy who does something. He's holding some weird item in his left hand and a pole arm in his right hand. So there's some utility function guy. I don't know. And I don't know the Bone Reaper's background well enough to, I think somebody who's a little better versed in their lore would be able to. But enough about people we won't see for some time.
Yeah.
I can guess, but what have you been up to lately?
Well, I'm guessing that you guessed that I've been poring over the cards as they've been revealed for the Starblood Stalkers, and as soon as I have my hands on the actual models, I am going to be building and painting them. I think after we get done here, I'll probably get a deck put together and maybe start testing them out.
All right. Sounds excellent.
How about you?
I have been playing some Rippas. I got to play a Rippas mirror match in our team tournament, which was a really, I can't remember if I already talked about this. But it was a lot of fun. It was real back and forth. I realized most people don't care for mirror matches in general, which is understandable. And I think I was not especially looking forward to it, but it ended up being great. yeah, I do like that warband quite a bit, and I think they got a couple cool things in the universals that came alongside your lizards here. So
yeah, I think there's quite a few good universals that we'll get to talk about.
yeah,
But I think before we jump in fully, did you have any community shoutouts for this week? I have not been paying very close attention
two
to what other people
two
have been posting.
two small ones, I'll say. Well, I guess one would be to the Path to Glory guys who already have like 2 episodes out. We're recording this; they've already released their 2. They are flying. So they've released an episode on the universals, an episode on the stalkers themselves, and in the same vein of people doing stuff really really fast for the community, Deckers and Underworlds DB, both those sites have already updated. It was literally within hours. I think yesterday we got to see all the cards on Warhammer Community, and hours later I remember seeing that they had updated their deck builders, which is shocking. I don't know. I'm impressed. those guys just like clear the decks for that. I don't know how you. Anyway, hats off
it's
to them.
Impressive.
Always.
Yeah,
legends. And then, one other thing was cool. I know that I mentioned the Tabletop Sydney channel, and I happened to be watching another one of their videos. We were talking a little bit about it before recording. It was pretty fun. Kaggers versus Godsworn Hunt, and then I hopped into the comments. I was going to say something that I noticed. I guess one of our listeners, David Lawrence, said that he found that channel. He was excited to see that channel. He said he heard about it here. So, and he mentioned that. That was cool of him. And I'm glad it was, you've always figured that people are scoping out your recommendations, but I'm glad that we were able to turn at least one person on to that channel, because those guys are doing great stuff, and I'm glad they're getting more people to take a gander. So
awesome. Great stuff. Always good to see.
Yeah. But let's finish with the preamble. Let's get to what you've been waiting for such a long time. So,
yes,
the stalkers. We're going to do our usual, the warband playstyle, faction cards, universals, maybe a little speculation. But why don't you start us off on this main topic here?
Yeah. So I guess. I don't know. How do you want to do this? Do you want to break down just run down each fighter, or do you want to start with universal shared mechanics and then dive into the details?
Let's go for some of the shared mechanics, such as they are. It is my takeaway just at the first glance was like, whoa, there was a lot of different things going on here. I'm going to have a hard time keeping track of what skink does what. I think once I see the miniatures, that might help. But it's going to feel like one of those. You sometimes have the warbands. You're like, gosh, I know one of these guys on 2 swords. I'm thinking of maybe the beastman here, where one of these guys has a slightly better melee attack, and one of them doesn't, and I don't remember which. And whatever my opponent happens to tell me, I'm like, yep, that sounds fine. So.
Yep. I think it'll be very similar, and I think having all these sort of the names don't exactly just roll off the tongue. Unless maybe you're someone who speaks Nahuatl, which you probably don't. But their names definitely appear to be based off of Nahuatl, which is Aztec, for those who are not aware. And yeah, they definitely are not stuff you normally would see. So they definitely don't stick. But I think the nice thing is that all these different skinks have different weapon loadouts. You can just kind of be like, yeah, guy with the club and the shield, that one, and then one with a blowpipe, chameleon.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I guess since we're talking about the skinks, let's start there with the shared mechanics that all the skinks in the warband have, and that is their inspire condition. So. The warband has 2 separate inspire conditions, which is a little strange. It's not unheard of, but it definitely is not very common. And that is that all the skinks inspire after an activation where your warband is holding 3 or more objectives. So basically, do a temporary victory, and then your skinks will inspire, which is pretty nice, and suggests that you probably want them to play into holding objectives at least a little bit, because you're probably going to do it anyway.
Sure.
What's
your instinct, having mentioned that, how important is the Inspire, do you think, or you want to touch on that later?
We can touch on it now, I guess, but then maybe we'll be able to elaborate as we go through stats. But I think generally it's probably not actually essential. Most of the fighters don't get a lot better with inspiration. Mm-hmm. I think the ones who really benefit are the ones who gain additional defense, mm-hmm. which is Autopodle and Talk. So Talk is the blowpipe and club skink. He goes from 1 dodge to 2, which definitely helps when you're only on 2 wounds. And Autopodle being the chameleon, he's already at 2 and goes up to 3, which we've only ever seen on one other fighter. So that should be pretty nice to have 3 dodge.
Mm-hmm. So not end of the world if you can't pull it off.
No, I don't think so. I mean, like, you don't hit any harder usually when they inspire, and they don't all get any better in defense. Like, most of them just stay the same. Speed, it seems like, is the big thing across all of them except the leader. Like, I was actually trying to see, like, okay, do they all have like one thing in common with their inspiration? No, none of them. Like, across the board, they're all a little bit different. So like, they're very varied.
Yeah. Little Godsworn hunting that way, I guess, as well.
Yeah,
that's maybe another parallel to draw.
And then the only other commonality with the skinks is that the ones, so the 3 dangle skinks, if you will, Talk, Shipik, and Huachi, which are the blowpipe and club guy, the shield and club guy, and the spear guy, they all have this rule called skittish, which is a reaction where after an opponent's power step, which is a fairly unique reaction window, I think, you can then push a fighter 1 hex away from an enemy fighter who's within 2 hexes. So I think that's going to be pretty situational, but I think people are going to really have to pay attention to the positioning of skinks, because all of a sudden they can be moving around. And since you'll get to do that potentially a few times around, that could be a lot of additional movement that you're not necessarily expecting.
Yeah, it feels like maybe the pro level of play with these is setting up the board or setting up your positioning to be able to really take advantage of this. Is that feels like there's potential, but it's difficult to unlock potential.
I think so too. I think it feels like these guys are going to be a lot to sort of wrap your head around to start. Mm-hmm. I think if you just pick them up, they're probably fine just without a whole lot of forward planning. But I think to really unlock a lot of their abilities, you're going to have to know like 3 steps ahead what you're trying to do.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. What about breaking into some of these individual fighters?
Sure. So do you want to lead us off with a quick overview of the leader, Kishitaka?
Kishitaka is starts out with 4 move, 2 dodge, 3 health, and does not get better than that on Inspire. Has a range 2 attack, 2 smash, 2 damage. That doesn't change on Inspire. And a range 3 attack, 2 smash, 1 damage, goes up to 3 smash, 1 damage. Very accurate. Which is a good way to ping things or knock people off of objectives. But you know what another good way to mess up people's objectives are? Yeah. Is with this special action, which is, read it first here. It's pick one feature token within 3 hexes. And then you either flip that feature token or deal 1 damage to 1 enemy fighter within 1 hex of that token. So that if everything aligns right, that's you could ping somebody from 4 away, which is pretty great, especially since no dice are involved. So this feels like a thing that sometimes is going to be, inconsequential, won't matter at all, and sometimes it's gonna blow a round wide open. So it'll be cool to see, fun plays with that, and whether it unlocks, a feed the beast grave strategy or not. That's also interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think one other thing that's important to mention with that is that it can only be used once per round.
Sure.
So you can't just sit there and ping people over and over again, which is probably a good thing. Free ping damage would probably be a little too good.
Sure.
But I agree. I think it'll be like in the situations where it's useful, it could absolutely change a game. I mean, just right off the top of my head, just thinking like somebody goes and runs on an objective and you can sort of see they're setting up something with holding objectives, and you're just like, well, I'm going to flip that one that you're standing on. And there's so few abilities that allow you to flip hexes that people are occupying. So
sure, right.
I think having that ability, it can be pretty interesting.
Yeah. And so the cost of an action is substantial. And then also he's got to be within range. So how you set up your objectives are going to be pretty important with that. Yeah. So if there's one particular one you want to get, he's got good speed, but that's like a 2 action investment. You got to move and then flip.
Yeah.
And it cannot be a charge and flip. So you couldn't like, I'm going to charge into their territory, shoot somebody with my ranged attack, and then after that, if I still need to, I'll flip it, because once you've charged, you can't activate anymore. So going to be a little tricky to set up, but
for sure.
Let's talk about his substantial opposite here, the Clacktrock.
Yeah, Clacktrock. So Clacktrock, he's our big old Saurus Old Blood. He's the only Saurus in the warband, so he's really your bruiser. He's the guy who's coming in to do some damage, do some work. He's rolling out 3 move, 1 block, 4 health, which, pretty average stat line for a melee fighter. What's not average is his Celestite War Maul, where it's range 1, 2 smash for 3 damage, which is about as good as uninspired attacks get. I think the only way they get better is with reach 2. And then he also has his powerful Jaws attack, which just the stat line's pretty, inconsequential. It's range 1, 1 sword for 1 damage. But he has a reaction that allows him to make that attack after his activation. So there's a lot of flexibility there. This is very much the same as how the wolves work in Rippas. So anybody who likes running Rippas will probably be very used to this. And same as the Rippas, this attack cannot have its characteristics be modified. So it's always 1 damage, and it's probably always very inaccurate.
But it is happy to see any rerolls or supports that you can give it. Like those, because those don't count as modifiers. Those are good ways to boost this attack. And then having another attack is always handy. Sometimes you just get lucky. So he has a potential 4 out of the gate. Or if your main goal is to drive somebody off of an objective, having a second shot at it if your first missed is good. But it unlocks things like Master of Battle or Steady Assault or different things where you need to get multiple actions or attacks out of a single fighter. So
yeah. It's kind of crazy to think that off of 1 charge he could get 3 actions. So you could score that off of 1 activation, which is pretty crazy. And then he does have a different inspiration from the rest of the warband, which we alluded to earlier. And his inspiration is just make a successful attack. So another good reason to have extra attacks.
Yeah.
I guess we didn't mention when he does inspire, he does get slightly better. He goes up to 4 move, 2 block, and his powerful Jaws gain 1 more dice for a little added accuracy, but that's it. So I think
that's not nothing, though. I mean, especially as your bruiser, it's nice if you can engineer a way to get that first attack to land. Then his follow-up rounds, he's more likely to be there because he's got more defense, and he's more likely to be able to reach people will be less able to kind of scatter away from him. So
yeah, I think the 4 move and 2 block is very substantial. I don't know that the extra sword on the jaws makes a lot of difference, but yeah, being faster, I think, especially.
I can tell you, having played plenty of Rippas, that extra dice is that's one more where you can have that heartbreaking crit for somebody. So
Nice. Yeah. Well, all right. So then, I think maybe the star of the show, or at least the the weirdest guy here who's changing things up for the rest of the warband, or like just underworlds in general. Do you want to cover the chameleon Autopodal?
Autopodal, he joins the exclusive club that previously only had Slake Slash in it as being a hunter and a quarry.
Yeah.
So he's got 3 keywords: skink, hunter, and quarry. Just a ranged attack, range 3, and then now he's the only member of this club has a printed attack that hits on crits and nothing else. So it rolls 3 dice, fishing for crits, doing 1 damage. It has cleave and ensnare, and I've seen a number of people ask online, like, what point is that if you only hit on crits? If you have supports, then this will help negate those other elements. Because it's a little blowpipe, it's not hitting hard, so it cannot drive a fighter back. But most notably, if its attack action succeeds, give the target 1 move token, which is huge if you can engineer a hit. You can strand a fighter somewhere, which is pretty cool. This feels like it's going to be it's one of those things where when you're looking at it from the other side, you're like, well, he's not necessarily odds on to hit, but the penalty for being hit by him is just so crushing that you have to respect it.
Yeah.
Speed 4, 2 dodge, 2 health, and gets an extra speed and an extra dodge on Inspire. And actually an extra point of damage on that attack, which really makes him, you don't want him sitting in the middle machine gunning people.
No.
So, yeah. He'll be fond of any rerolls, additional chance to scoop up crits. And then, not that you really want to have a lot of skinks hanging out next to people, but if you were to have the opportunity to shoot at somebody that maybe Clacktrock is engaged with, then you prevent that person from running away from Clacktrock. Clacktrock gives you the supports for hitting. And then that whatever that model is can't run past Clacktrock to get at your much more fragile skinks in the back line.
Definitely. I think he's going to be, again, like one of those things where it's not something you plan around necessarily, but like when the situations arise where it's like the game basically, like, 3rd round, your opponent has 1 big hitter left, and if you just put a move token on him, it ends the game. Like, of course you're going to take that dive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why wouldn't you take like a 40% chance to try and lock them down and win the game? So, I don't know that you like rely on that, but there'll certainly be situations where you hope that it works, because if it does, the payoff is huge.
Right.
And I mean, I was thinking about it because I was like, man, hitting on crits, that is just brutal to only hit on crits. But effectively with cleave and ensnare, you're making your opponent's defense crits as well. Right. So it's kind of like, it works out.
Yeah. Pretty interesting piece, like very, very unique, not something we've seen before. And that's always welcome.
Yeah.
What do you think of, let's see, what we got just the backup singers here, the backup skinks. Why don't you pick one of those, or maybe you can kind of lump them together.
I was thinking we can probably just kind of run them down in 2 groups. So we've got Huachi and Shepik, which are the 2 that are on block. So their stat lines are the same. They start at 4 move, 1 block, 2 health. And they inspire to 5 move, 1 block, 2 health. So they're probably your most vulnerable fighters in the warband, even though dodge technically is worse. They never go up above 1 defense. So they'll be, even inspired, they'll be the easiest to hit fighters in the warband. Huachi has the spear, which he's actually pretty decent in melee. He's got reach 1, 2 smash for 2 damage. So that's, as good as anybody in Magor's. And then he can throw his spear as well, which is a reach 3, 2 swords for 1 damage that I'm not seeing anything that says that he loses the javelin after he throws it. So he can just keep chucking javelins, which is pretty decent.
He's the first guy smart enough to bring more than one.
So. Yeah. And when he inspires, his javelin does get slightly more accurate with 3 dice and does gain knockback 1 for what that's worth. Jepik, I don't think really there's much to say about his attacks. He starts at reach 1, 2 swords for 1 damage, and it gets just nominally better at 3 swords for 2 damage once he's inspired. But I think if you're relying on him to get your work done, something has gone terribly wrong. Sort of like a Turash moment.
Yeah. Oh no, what has happened? Everybody. So those are the 2 shield ones.
And yep, 2 shield guys. You want to bring it home with Talk?
Talk also has a club. Talk is a little rough here. He's starting on 1 dodge. He does inspire to 2, but his attacks at the outset are not so great. He's looking at 2 fury for 1 damage at 3 range, or 2 fury for 1 damage at range 1.
Yeah.
So this guy's whatever spot in your 6 fighter warband, whatever spot you're putting Grawl on is probably the spot that this guy's going on. But he gets 1 extra dice on his melee attack when he inspires, extra speed and extra dodge. So he's going to be the one doing the least, I guess. It is nice to have a ranged attack, though. Especially late. Yep. If you're starting to run short on people, it lets you do something without leaving your spot, or lets you set up trap situations, or pushes into lethal hex are a little more easy with this. So it's not nothing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I guess because you look at Talk uninspired, and you're probably saying that he's the worst. But if you look at Jepik, inspired, he's maybe worse when you compare him to inspired Talk. So I don't really know which one you sort of put forward as your sacrificial skin.
Sure.
But
fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they could all be decent, but it's just don't rely on them to really do a lot of work.
Right. I think the only thing I wanted to say before we move on from the fighters here, Clacktrock, just be aware of the order of how things happen after an activation. So the first thing that happens is inspiration, then reactions, and then the chance to score surges. So he can actually inspire with his first hit. He can potentially inspire himself straight to the 2 fury attack for his jaws, which is pretty cool. So
that's definitely useful.
Yeah, you could surprise somebody that way.
I think the only other thing to mention is that all 3 of the Dangle Skinks are hunters. So
right, sure.
They do unlock some pretty nice cards that way, but I don't know how much you want to invest in these guys.
Right. I mean, if you have some cards that need a hunter to be able to do it, at least you have a little insurance there, plus whatever upgrades you happen to be taking. So you do have 4 hunters once you include the chameleon.
Yeah.
Oddpottle.
Is that's second most in the game, right?
Yeah, I believe Grimwatch have 5 because the Duke, for reasons unknown, is also a hunter. Yeah. All right. So that's the baseline. With those in mind, let's talk some faction cards. So we'll start the usual spot, objectives. Is there an objective that you thought was particularly exciting?
Well, I think both just in terms of how it works and just in how good of a reward it is for doing it. I think the Great Plan is the one that jumped out at me first. This is a lot like Superior Tactician, but this is a duel where you score in the end phase if you have scored 6 or more objective cards and you have scored 1 or more Surge, 1 or more Duel, and one or more hybrid objective cards. So not exactly super complex to do. I mean, if you're going to have scored 6 of your 12 objectives, hopefully you can have scored a surge in there. And if you can just get 1 duel and a hybrid, you get 3 glory. And since that can be scored in any end phase, I mean, basically you're looking at for rounds 2 or 3, you could pretty easily be rolling into a 3 glory end phase, which
big time.
Good.
I mean, I remember how rough it could be in the first couple of seasons where you're waiting for that superior tactician to come into play, and you know that you're going to be working against that. And here, the many of the hybrids that people are taking these days also happen to be surges. So you have a surge hybrid. So that makes you can kind of double dip on that. So that feels very doable. And anytime I'm making a deck with these folks, you're going to be keeping an eye on that. So
for sure.
And anytime you're playing against them, you have to be thinking like, is their glory actually 3 higher than it looks like it is? You know? Because once they've achieved that, I mean, this is the thing with this is like, let's say you have a real solid couple of rounds early on, and you know this is coming. You can kind of back off, knowing that you've got 3, and unless they've got something real good, the opponent's going to have a hard time keeping pace.
I would definitely agree. I mean, this is one where it's like, this is probably one of the best faction end phases that we've seen, if not one of the just best end phase cards that we've seen in this season. So yeah, I think it definitely is a definite standout. How about you? Any that really jumped out at you?
So I feel like I'll go with one that's just powerful. Instinctive Tactics. It's a surge. Yeah. You get it after you resolve your second or subsequent reaction in the same phase. So that'd be the entire action phase. And we've seen this before. Notable example would be Ilthari's Guardians had this. And given that 4 of the fighter cards have a reaction, 5 of them, if you count the leader, so you have 4 skinks with skittish.
Yep.
Autopodal doesn't have skittish, does he? I don't think so.
He does not.
Okay. So you have. I guess the leader.
I think it's 4 fighters with a reaction.
4 fighters. Yep. Clacktrock, and then the 3 hunter. Clacktrock's got his jaws, and the 3 hunters have their skittish. So there's a lot of built-in, and then with a little bit of construction in your objective, or not objective, upgrades and gambits, you can really work your way towards this. It's pretty well. And it's that kind of thing where you can kind of score it just in the course of playing the game normally, which is always powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I think what makes this even more frustrating is that the reactions that these guys have are reactions that are very hard to stop. Like Clacktrock's just going to get that extra attack. There's going to be very few situations where he's not. And while skittish isn't super easy to set up, it'll probably happen at some point. So, I mean, it just feels kind of like a free glory.
Yeah, I mean, you may be just skittishing specifically to score this card, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, I'll do this and give myself one more reaction for the round here. So
yeah, so I think those are sort of like the 2 strongest ones, or at least the ones that sort of jumped out at me as being really very strong.
Mm-hmm.
I think the rest of them fall more in like the interesting good category rather than like the super, super strong category. But I do think Will of the Slan is going to be pretty simple to do. So this is another end phase where if your warband holds 1 or more objectives in 2 or more players' territories, score 2 glory.
I'd agree with that. That feels like it meshes nicely with some of the hold. We talk about the hold 2 or the hold more sort of thing. So it's being very specific about where they need to be. But if you can get a handle on those 2, then it's likely that you are probably well positioned to work on dominant position or path to victory. You already maybe scored your hidden purpose if you took that.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
I think it's a good pick.
mean, it's effectively swift capture that you score in the end phase. Because we can assume that most games you're playing are going to be 2-player. Mm-hmm. In a multiplayer game, it's interesting because it could actually not include any in your territory at all, but I don't think that's really going to come up all that often. And I think this card sort of, I think, at least to me, it suggests that their play style is going to be flex. I mean, you could just go hard, hold objective, and use this card and be very well off with it. But I think it, like you were mentioning, there's a lot of hold 2 stuff that's pretty flex. And this is just yet another example of a good end phase card that you can use to help you with flex, where it's like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do and hold objectives at the same time and happen to score some good glory out of it.
Right. Yep. Yeah, you mentioned like the flex nature of these. They have a surprising number of cards that in their base deck that are encouraging them to end up in enemy territory.
Yeah,
and they have some interesting tools to do that. It feels weird because like trying to send the 3 hunters forward, or I keep on saying the 3 hunters, but Autopodal is his own thing. So, like sending them into enemy territory seems like a recipe for making sure the other person gets primacy. But, they have Seeking the Heart as a hybrid where you hold all objectives in enemy territory, or all your surviving fighters are in enemy territory. So, it's kind of like anytime you want it, conquest, with another hybrid option. So those are the kind of objectives where I'm like, I don't know if those are good or not. Like I would have to see them play. I'd have to see some deck builds. I think you would have to be building pretty specifically for that. But it's not like 2 glory end phase are a dime a dozen. Having completable ones is always interesting or helpful.
Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned, completable, right? It's those end phases that you can do. And I think the nice thing with these is that they're balanced, right? I mean, it's not super easy. You're not just going to get to glory, but at the same time, like you don't feel like it's so difficult that you'd never consider it. I do think that the interesting thing with these is that it's holding objectives in enemy territory, but it's just saying like hold all of them, which could be 1. If you've used Kishitaka to flip stuff from 3 hexes away, so say your opponent had 2 and they put 1 forward for some reason, and you flipped it, now you just have to hold 1 objective at the end of the phase to get 2 glory. So some interesting play.
Yeah, I think you end up in that situation sometimes where you have maybe on the board roll as the stalker player, you had 3 objectives. Your opponent is trying to disrupt your ability to hold 3, so places something, places an objective forward, and then if you can engineer it so that maybe you have 3 in yours, 1 in no man's, and 1 in theirs, like you can make this pretty scoreable for just the positioning of one fighter.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I mean, I think movement is going to be super important for them, because as you say, keeping fighters alive might be a bit of a problem. But if you're fast enough, you can just kind of blitz to do what you need to do. And then after you've done it, it's sort of like, well, I don't really care if they die now.
Sure.
So some interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. Any others that you think are real standouts? I think there's a few, but
so I think people will be tempted by Astromatrix alignment, which is you need to flip a feature token in enemy territory. There's a universal that may make this one of those coveted surges that you score in a power step. Pretty rare and pretty handy, but that's relying on one particular card. And this, like we were talking about with Kishitaka, is that you would have to generally, because you're not going to deploy him forward, it's going to take you 2 actions or an action and a power card in order to get into a position to do this. So maybe, I guess, I think if you're trying a feed the beast grave strategy with these guys, I think this goes in for sure, because you're going to have to do it at some point, right?
Yeah, and I think this one almost is a trap, right?
Sure.
Like,
well, yeah, but again, back to the feed the beast grave. If you got lethal snares on somebody and they're placing or running through stuff, then all of a sudden you have more avenues. So I think, but I agree. I think outside of feed the beast grave, I think it may be a trap.
Yeah.
The only other one I wanted to mention was Children of Azir. It's a duel. Score this in an end phase if each surviving friendly fighter is inspired and surviving friendly fighters have 3 or more upgrades. I can't remember seeing one that was just like, hey, have this many upgrades scattered around your warband, which is what this is saying. Like, you could have all 6 alive and 3 of them each have 1 or 2 on one on another, and you're good to go. I think that's caused a little bit of confusion for people, but having played plenty of Rippas, you have these things that are like 3 hunters each with 1 or 1 with 3 or whatever. This is kind of scattered around. I think this is going to be pretty tough, just because that inspire is not reliable, or maybe the time you inspire is the time where you just cannot manage to land a hit with Clacktrock. So but 2, I don't know.
I think this is one that maybe potentially gets easier as the game goes on. So like if you draw this in your 3rd phase, you probably feel pretty happy about it. If you draw this in your first hand, you feel terrible about it, right?
Sure.
So
because the upgrades are hard to get out that early.
Yep.
Yeah.
And getting inspired, it could take a while.
I guess the flip of Astro Matrix alignment, which was probably take it if you're doing feed the beast grave. This is the probably take it if you are going temporary victory. Because unless you're leaning hard in that direction, kind of going all out to grab yourself 3 at some point, the inspire will not be reliable enough for this to be good. But if you are going that direction, then if temp victory, you get 2 glory, you inspire, then you're 2/3 of the way towards getting those upgrades out. I don't know. So
yeah.
But I think it'll probably end up on the cutting room floor. If you,
I think there's probably some better options as well. Yep.
Sure.
I think
anything else before we move on to the next category?
The only other one that I think is probably really one that I would consider is Balance the Cosmic Equation. So this is a hybrid, and I think the secondary condition is the one that would make me consider it. But this is another end phase where you can score it either by having 2 or more enemy fighters out of action, which could be easy, could be incredibly difficult, or your warband holds more objectives than an enemy warband.
Yeah.
I think that is already something we see pretty regularly. So doing it again doesn't necessarily seem like a bad thing. And if you're facing a swarm and you can get 2 kills without too much trouble, then yeah, why not?
Sure. And then it's just down to whether as 1 glory end phase objectives go, is it going to find a space in there? Are there more? Are there easier ones to snag?
Yep, for sure. And I think maybe just as a blanket statement for the rest of these, like they're almost all of the rest of these are aggro, and I don't know that you really want to be leaning into aggro with these guys because your only reliable damage source is Clacktrock.
Sure. Yeah. All right. What have you got for gambits? What gambits grab your attention?
So there's quite a few actually that I think are very good, but I'm going to just start with the asterisms and we can just sort of cover them all as a group. So these are sort of their unique thing in their ploys, and they work exactly like the cycles from Wormspat, where they persist through the remainder of the round, giving a bonus to your entire warband unless another asterism card is played, in which case that one replaces the one that was previously in play.
Yeah. I'm only just noticing this. It's any player plays another asterism. So in the mirror matches, you can cancel out your opponent's asterism with your own.
Yeah, which is interesting and definitely makes them riskier if you know that there's a lot of stalkers being played, but I don't know how often you are going to expect a mirror match. So I think there's still two that are good. The Hunter's Steed and the Great Drake. Hunter's Steed gives +1 movement to all friendly fighters for the remainder of the round, which I think is pretty nice. Because, blanket +1 movement is almost certainly going to be useful, especially on a warband that needs to be able to get around to objectives and enemy territory. And like Clacktrock being slow, having a ploy that's both going to help him and just buff the rest of your warband is probably worth having. And then the other one is +1 dice to all friendly fighters' range 1 attack actions, which I think is just amazing no matter what, because it's just saying an entire round of all of my fighters being much, much better at fighting.
Yep. I think in other warbands, you would say this is broken. In this warband, it feels about right. If you look at how many range 1 attacks you have in this warband that you really care about, you're like, I guess it's that can be modified. That list gets a lot smaller. If this was available in another warband, you're like, how did they ever think it was okay to print this? This seems pretty on point, I think.
Yeah. I think that's the nice. They're like a nice balance. They give a nice bonus, but it's not so powerful that you have to really be worried about it. I guess since we mentioned them, we'll just say that there is a third asterism called the Bulwark Celestial. I don't think you'll ever play it. It makes it so that friendly fighters cannot be driven back. The only problem with that is basically that most of your fighters will probably die in one hit. So I don't think you care if they get driven back because they're probably just a smear on the floor.
Somebody will prove me wrong, but it's pretty corner case where you would want that instead of where that would somehow crack your 10. Like you can think of situations where it'd be useful, but I don't think you can think of many situations where that would beat out, 10 other gambits to make it into your deck.
Yeah. I mean, there's like 5 other gambits just in this faction set that I think I would take before I took that. So
here's one it does beat out is Tepok's Mystery. The real mystery here is why would you take this card?
Yeah.
It kind of feels, it says pick an opponent, they choose an objective card and shuffle it back into their deck and then draw one. It feels like this must have had a last minute change or something, or I don't know. It feels like in general, this is beneficial to the extent that the first time I read it again, because like, maybe you can play it on yourself. I'm like, no, you can't. So
that would actually be very good.
Yeah. I was trying to think, like there are a few ways you could kind of tweak this where if it was like, look at their objective hand and then they can do, and then you have a kind of a cool guessing game of like, I saw your cards, then you ditched one. So I know 2 out of the 3, but I don't know which one I know. And did you draw it up? But that's okay.
Yeah. Or even if you got to pick one at random so that your opponent doesn't get to choose the one that they're least likely to score. Right.
Yeah.
I guess the other way it could go is that instead of having them like shuffle and draw, like you actually have it be like a lockdown where you'd say you just can't score that card this round or something, but then it would be really strong, and that's probably too much. So I'm guessing there were probably stories about what happened with this card in playtesting. So maybe we'll hear about them someday.
Sure. There's some power. You said there were other powerful ones in here. What? Give me one of those that you take.
Yeah. Well, I think maybe one of the most powerful ones is Huan Chi's Device. So this is this is a very like wordy power card, but essentially it's distraction, or you can make your opponent pick 3 of their fighters and have to push all of them 1 hex. You always want that, because like, say you're facing an aggro warband, your opponent probably would like to be able to push 3 of their fighters forward.
Yeah.
But if you know your opponent's trying to set something up with positioning, and you just like, oh, I can see that that's coming, I play this card, and then that blows their whole plan out of the water, that's very good. And even if you just use it as another distraction, I think almost anybody would take a second distraction. So
yeah, 100%. If all this said was, here's another distraction, you'd be like, yes, please. That is great. I mean, we specifically talk about warbands that are like this. The power of this warband is slightly higher because they have an in-faction distraction. Like it. And so this is in-faction distraction plus a little bit extra. So yeah, totally. Since we're talking about pushes, I kind of like Burst from the Shadows. This is choose up to 2 friendly hunters, push each chosen fighter up to 2 hexes. With as many, 4 of your warband are hunters right out of the gate. With as many hunter cards as exist out there, the savage upgrades and such, it's not uncommon for one of your other fighters. You get Savage Visage on Clacktrock, and all of a sudden he's eligible for this, and pushing a melee fighter 2 hexes is nice.
Yeah.
But what I find particularly attractive about this one is that I think if you play it in your opponent's power step, then once the power step is done, you'll have the opportunity to react with Skittish. I think you can make some really clever plays with this, where you maneuver a skink into a spot where they can then Skittish onto an objective or into an important place or something like that. So I think there's, I think there's opportunity for some really, really cool plays, which I'm sure I'll be on the receiving end of, but I'll try to cheer them through gritted teeth when it happens.
Yeah, I think these guys, just all the different push chaining and movement chaining that you can do with them is going to be a headache for people once they really start to figure out all the different nifty combos that they can do. So I definitely agree. I think Burst from the Shadows is great. And I mean, it's almost a little crazy that they printed it this way instead of having it be choose up to 2 friendly skinks or something, because hunters, as you say, you can just add that fairly easily right now. And in most other warbands where we have like push 2 friendly fighters 2 hexes, it's limited to like this specific keyword, like in the ghouls, it's specifically
Pack advance.
Yeah, like you have to use it on a crypt ghoul, and or like the nobblers in Hrothgorn, there's a card you can push 2 of them, and so I'm just a little surprised that it's like just 2 hunters, but maybe with rotation that'll become less powerful. But yeah, I think that one is super good and definitely one I will be taking.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's fun, and I think it's deceptively powerful. Would you, since this is your warband, well, we're talking about not just deceptively powerful, but just straight up powerful, Lords of Space and Time. What do you think of this guy?
Yeah. Lords of Space and Time is pretty crazy. You get to choose a friendly fighter that is not adjacent to any enemy fighters, and then place them in the same hex as an objective token in enemy territory that's not adjacent to enemy fighters. So while it is limited in that you know where you can go and who you can pick to teleport is not as flexible as you might want it to be, the precision with which you get to place fighters is good. Also, of note, you can choose any fighter, even if they've charged or moved already.
Sure.
You do have to give them another move token after they do this, but if you've already charged, why would you care? So some very interesting plays you can do with this card. And like, so, you know, goes well with some of those objectives who are holding stuff in enemy territory, because teleports let you jump onto objectives when your opponent really can't stop you.
Right.
I don't know. Like this card is pretty good. I think we'll see how well people can just force you to not be able to do it. But I think even having that ability to control how your opponent plays the game is valuable. So
right. Just the possibility that this could be in the Stalker's deck is going to affect how people are playing against them.
Definitely.
Like, okay, well, do I keep somebody within one of this objective so they can't space and time onto it, or it's going to tax mental resources from the opponent, whether you even have it in your deck or not.
Man, I don't know. There's just so many combos with this. It just gets my head spinning a little bit. Do you want to run us down on? It's not as powerful, but a similar sort of mechanic with Invisible Hunter.
Sure. This is unique to Autopodal. Remove a friendly Autopodal from the battlefield. That fighter is not out of action. This card persists until the end of the round. When this card no longer persists, place that fighter in an empty hex not adjacent to any enemy fighters. You cannot play this card in round 3. There's another way to kind of teleport in. As I read it, there's some weird things where if we occasionally see these things where like finish all persisting gambits end or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could do it yourself, right? Like if you really wanted him to come back early, that's super duper corner case. That is like you think you have a big brain, but you're really just making it more complicated than you need to. But it is pretty cool. Like, if somebody is counting on getting a certain number of kills or, I don't know, like it's such a unique card and so characterful with Autopodal, like the idea that he just disappears and then reappears somewhere else.
Yeah.
When he goes full invisible, like this is just fun. So
very fun.
Yeah. And pops up, if he's inspired, then all of a sudden he's popped up and he's a range 2 attack that's showing up in somebody's backfield. Yuck. No, thank you.
Yeah. So. I think it's interesting to know that since this will more often than not end when you just normally would clear persisting ploys, which is at the end of the phase, that you wouldn't be getting him back until after you scored objectives. So if you wanted to use it to
end of the round specifically rather than end of the phase. So
yeah. So if you were wanting to use this to try and score with, it's actually pretty difficult. You can use it as like an interrupt. You can use it to let him dive so he can charge, make an attack. And like if you failed, you just pop him out and then he's safe.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of ways to use this, but I think it's still a very niche card because like if you draw it late in the game, you can't use it. If you don't have Autopodal, you can't use it. Like, so it's a nice balance, I think.
Yeah.
Not too strong, but definitely valuable.
Yeah, I think as one of the uses you just mentioned there, I think is probably the most common use is I charged an Autopodal and I either succeeded in putting a move token on somebody I really wanted to put a move token on with his blow dart, or whatever the case. Now he's in a threatened position and I'm just going to pick him up and you cannot. Basically, I got a free pop at you, and now I'm safe. So.
Yeah,
little illusory fighter.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking too. I was like back in the old illusory fighter days, and I guess one thing we maybe haven't mentioned, but like, there's no restriction on any of these fighters about being able to equip weapons.
True. Yep.
So if you really wanted to, you could probably do some crazy stuff with Autopodal or the other skinks by giving them weapons. And
talking about him charging with an amber worm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's take advantage of that great Drake. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about all but 2 of these ploys at this point. Do you want to, let's just round it out. Do you want Light of the Stars or Sotex Venom next?
I'm going Sotex Venom here. So it's a poison. We have seen plenty of other poisons, only one objective that cares about them. We talked about that last episode. This is a reaction. Play this during a friendly fighter's attack action after the deal damage step. Give the target 1 move token. Doesn't matter what range your attack is. Doesn't matter who's making it. It can be from anybody in the warband. Obviously, particularly powerful on ranged weapons where you can ping somebody from farther away. But also you could drive them back. So hit them, drive them back, and then apply this. This is like almost a reason to like take this warband here. Like handing out move tokens like this is nuts, and it automatically increases the value of any fighter in this warband that has a ranged attack.
Yeah.
Because if you can sneak something through, obviously you actually have to deal damage. Otherwise, if it's an unsuccessful attack, you're going to skip the deal damage step. But this is humongous, and it's gonna make, if you got a later game, you're playing Magors or something, they're down to a couple fighters, you cut their offensive output in half if you can throw a move token on one of these guys. So wild, really good.
Yeah,
must take.
Love it. And it's another reaction, so know.
Oh yeah.
If you want more reactions, there you go.
Yeah.
And the last one, also a reaction, is Light of the Stars. So this is a weird one, and I've already seen a lot of debate online about how this card triggers, but it says play this after an opponent plays a gambit. That gambit deals no damage. So the debate, I think, is, does a gambit have to deal damage for you to be able to play this, or can you just react to any gambit being played for the purposes of just playing a power card or playing a gambit? Mm-hmm. I guess I personally would land more on the side of you could just play it, because it doesn't, like, the triggering condition isn't play this after an opponent plays a gambit that deals damage or something. It's just after they play a gambit. But we've had other rulings where it's like you have to be able to complete every part of the card in order to play it. So we're going to need an FAQ, I think. I don't know. What do you think in terms of power? Like, is this one actually worth taking?
No, I think not right now. I don't think there's enough gambits that are doing damage. If we get into a realm of more ping damage, or I think even in like the heyday of curse breakers, this would still be a little bit tough to pick, because there's multiple warbands where they just won't do anything.
Yep.
And so I think there's too many cases where it doesn't do anything, that the times where it will do something, it's probably not worth it. So
generally would agree with that. I think this is one to just remember that it's out there. If the meta shifts and suddenly damage coming from cards becomes a thing, watch out.
Right. Well, we did it all 10.
We did them all.
Which is, kind of a testament to this pack. There's some, in one way or another, there were a lot of interesting cards to talk about in the gambits. But that leads us on to upgrades. Give me one of the ones that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So I don't know that there's a ton of super strong upgrades here, but I think one that I find to be very interesting is Spawning Bond. So Spawning Bond is restricted to skinks, so you can't put it on the big guy, but after another friendly skink is pushed from a hex that's within 3 hexes of this skink, you can then push this fighter 1 hex.
Yeah.
And so, like, with Skittish and other push cards, suddenly you could be pushing whoever you put this on quite a few times in a turn. Right. And it's yet another reaction. So I don't know. The number of reactions they have is pretty strong for that objective. And I mean, reactions to push, and not like push away or push towards, but just push is pretty juicy.
I think you're looking at this real hard if you are taking a hold objective deck. I think I might be wrong, but I think if you have Burst from the Shadows, where you'd push 1 and then push another, I think you could potentially push twice off of if it was positioned just so.
Oh my God.
I think this is most tempting for Autopodal, but but also Kishitaka. Like we were talking about the cost of having to move to get close enough to flip an objective, and then so this could position him for use of his ability as well. So
yeah,
I like that one. That was going to be my pick if I was picking first. So
if you had to pick a different one, what might you pick?
I think Supreme Predator is pretty. I think rerolls are real good, and so this is Clacktrock becomes a hunter, which is important because you're probably taking Burst from the Shadows, so gives him a way to get pushed with that. Also tap in if you happen to take Beast Trail, which yes, please. So just getting access to those is handy. It says he cannot be a quarry, so bear that in mind because there's a number of powerful things where they say, fighter becomes a quarry. If this fighter is a quarry, then gets this. So there's some anti-synergy here with, I don't know, like keep wanting to say predatory instinct, strength of terror. That's what I'm thinking of. Then the reroll one dice in this. Yeah, reroll one dice in this fighter's attack rolls if the target is a quarry, which they will be because. Oh no! Delete all that because he doesn't turn other people into a quarry, right? Oh no, each enemy. Gosh, man, I made him at
each enemy fighter. He basically becomes a lizard version of Hrothgorn.
Yeah, and the rerolls are real nice with that bite. That's one of the things that'll make that bite more accurate. But also, he's your heavy hitter. Here's your 3 base damage guy. He's 1 upgrade away from a 4 damage hit. So I think that's great for him. It's not restricted, so that is handy.
I think to put in perspective of how good this card is, even though it's restricted to Clacktrock, like this is a Awakened weapon that turns you into a hunter. And everybody took Awakened weapon when it was still available. So definitely one to think about.
There's weird corner cases where you've done something like, because it doesn't have a range restriction. So if you've given him a spear or a bow or a javelin or something like that, he'll still be able to reroll with that too. So
yep, definitely a nice one. Any others?
Yeah, I mean, an obvious is Unfeeling Resilience. This is that card type we've seen a number of times. Fighters dealt damage, reduce that damage by 1 to a minimum of 1. That is not restricted, although it kind of is in that you're not going to put it on any of your 2 wound hunters. The person who's going to get the most out of it is Clacktrock. There's some corner cases where you would put, where you might load it up onto Autopodal or Kihitaka. But I don't know. Like in some warbands, this is auto include, like crushes. Like, why would you not? Here it's a little more iffy, and it might get pushed out if you're going for some other strategy. If you're trying a feed the beast grave or trying a hold or something like that, you may run out of room for it. But these are always quite powerful.
Yeah, I think survivability is enough of a problem in this warband that you would be probably looking at this pretty hard. I mean, I know you say you wouldn't put it on a skink, but if you knew it was really important for that one skink to stay alive, it might be enough, right? I mean, if you know your opponent's hitting for 2 and you just need to survive 1 more attack, that could be enough. So, and I mean, it's super flexible. So definitely a strong one. Like you said, probably kind of an obvious option since it's been proven to be a good archetype of a card in other warbands.
What about you? What do you got that jumps out at you?
So there's 2 left that I think I would be really looking at hard to include, but I'm going to talk about the one that I think is maybe less powerful, but definitely interesting, which is Herald of the Old Ones. So this is restricted to Kishitaka, but what it does is it makes it so that if this fighter is within 3 hexes of a friendly skink, and notably he is a skink, so he will be within 3 hexes of himself, you can then reroll 1 defense roll in attack actions targeting those fighters. So this effectively is like giving a defensive reroll upgrade to all of your skinks as long as you position it right. And with like 2 dodge and 3 dodge fighters, I think that reroll could actually be pretty good.
Pretty big deal.
I think the 1 block guys even really would love to have a reroll, because sometimes that's going to be the thing that makes or breaks your game.
Yeah, especially early on. I mean, we're seeing some more accuracy into the game, but a block with a reroll can be pretty great. Like it's a pretty good boost to survivability if they've only rolled the 1 success, and that happens plenty of times.
For sure. Well, speaking of accuracy, I think you were probably thinking about this one that I was thinking about as well for your last one. Is that right?
Heaven blessed weapon. A little bit of this. Yeah. As +1 dice and knockback 1 to this fighter's range 1 attack actions. So you again, Clacktrock is your obvious candidate for it, but he's not the only one. You know, sometimes just landing a hit that'll get somebody off of an objective, and also knockback 1 is not nothing, because it means that they need more than a sidestep or a distraction to get back in range. So, that's pretty good if you're going offensive. Pretty cool. I don't think I would take this. I think there's an insane build that has selfless sacrifice, which is restricted to skink. If you have a skink that's about to die, then it gets to make an attack action. So if you were going with that kind of weapon build or something, you had somebody running around with the larval lance or something like that, then getting an extra larval lance stab is pretty cool. So
yeah, I mean, it just feels like one of those things where if you're getting to that point, like, I don't know, like maybe there's better things you could be doing.
Oh, there 100% are. I totally agree. I just the art is cool. You got one of the skinks just like diving at like Slash's claw.
Yeah.
All right, bud.
Who that's? Shepik?
Oh, Shepik. Yeah. He's got a club and a shield. All right.
Well, I think unless you want to talk about one of the other couple that we didn't mention, I think those are the only ones that I thought really stood out. I guess there are only 2 more.
No, I think we're pretty good here.
Yeah. I mean, they're basically very similar. They both give bonus move. So if you need more move, you've got it. You got options. So, there you go. Yeah.
There's a camouflage to make your autopodal more defensive from range, and a crazy one where you spend glory to give cleave. That they seem pretty corner case, but if you're all in on the autopodal strategy, whatever that may be, then maybe.
I guess Astrolith Igniter could actually be pretty useful. I mean, it's going to be niche, but like when you really need cleave, sometimes just having it available for 1 attack can really make a big difference. So
yeah,
maybe.
Sure. I mean, you've got it does make getting damage through on Hrothgorn a lot easier when Hrothgorn's inspired. Walking around with 2 block, like that's putting them down to crits is pretty nice. So it's on demand, and it can be on multiple fighters as long as you got the glory to spend.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts on the warband overall here, Phil?
Yeah. I think I mentioned it already, but generally, I think the Stalkers feel like a very flexible warband. I think there's lots of different ways you could play them. And I think that also means that to figure out like how to play them best is going to be difficult, and they're probably going to have a really high skill ceiling. Like if you are really good at piloting them and taking advantage of all the weird tricks that they can do, they will probably take you very far. But I do think that there's going to be a big disparity in terms of like people who just started playing them and people who've played a ton of games with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Your comment about them being a flexible warband, that kind of aligns with 2 of the, so Kagras, they're kind of unilateral in the way they generally want to go, but I remember having the impression that Dread Pageant and the purifiers. They have a lot of different directions you can build them, and this feels fairly similar.
I definitely agree.
I think one of the biggest challenges these have coming out of the bat is that they are a 6-fighter warband, and the more of those hexes you fill up at the start, the more people can get at you. But I look forward to seeing some cool games with these guys.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to playing them. So hopefully we can face off a bit, and you can school me and show me how to not play these guys.
we'll return with like, here's what doesn't work.
Yeah.
That sounds cool. So we have gone on for plenty of time already. So we are going to save the universals for a next episode. We'll follow that up. We'll get a chance to see some of those in the field of play, and then talk them up a little bit. I know there's some reviews out there. If you just can't wait, check them out. And then I guess I'd say in general, we tend to do these as we just talk about the ones that we find interesting. There was enough that we found interesting. We ended up talking about a lot of these cards. If you would rather just hear us talk about every card, or if you like how we do it, let us know. We'll be receptive to feedback, or not, but it'd be nice to hear. Any final thoughts before we close out here, Phil?
No, I think that's enough to chew on for now. We got a lot to work through here. All right. Well, I think that then will wrap us up. As always, if you would like to get in touch with us, you can do so at WTHcast on Twitter or whatthehexcast@gmail.com. If you can't get enough of our show, or if you're just interested in more about the Mortal Realms in general and the lore behind all these fighters in Underworlds, then you can check out all the rest of the content from the Mortal Realms at themortalrealms.com. And as Davy just mentioned, our next episode, not entirely sure when we will do that, but we will come back at you with the other half of this release, talking about those universals. Davy, you got a recommended listening for folks today?
I do. I've got this is a band called King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, and the song is "Time Equals Fate."
Oh man. That name is pretty perfect. The only thing that would make it better is if there was an actual lizard wizard in this warband.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, for What the Hex, I've been Davy.
And I've been Phil.
All right. I'm going to edit this out, but I'm just... All right. Let me get this recording locked in. All right. Cool. I'm sure I'll eventually run out of save spots on Underworlds DB,